Drum sounds don't just fall out of the sky. 9 times out of 10, they're dictated by the style of music that a player or a big group of players is trying to execute. Today, we're going to talk about how to utilize some of these specific tuning schemes to broaden your playing and get you away from what you're used to. When we were talking about how we wanted to deliver this episode, we kept coming back to the phrase suspension of disbelief. When it comes to watching film or a play or anything visual, this is a sense of being able to immerse yourself in the story that's happening and lose yourself a little bit. And sometimes a good story will take you all the way through, and sometimes there are hiccups that take you out of it. When it comes to sounds that you think you're not going to like, try to suspend your disbelief. Try to go in with a complete beginner's mindset and forget everything you think you know about what's right or wrong or appropriate or cool or stupid or whatever it is. There are bottomless options for where we could take this subject, but today we're going to choose one that's a little off the beaten path and talk about pitching our drums up in the realm of what jazz drummers from the classic 50s and 60s would tend to do. Now, before you slam on the brakes and go, I don't like jazz drums, I don't like high-tuned drums, this is not for me, consider the possibility that this is not about liking a sound. This is about using a sound as an opportunity to examine our own playing. The quickest way to get stymied in your playing and get sluggish is to do the same thing all the time. And beyond practicing the same stuff all the time and trying to break out of that, getting into new sounds, especially ones that make you cringe or feel weird or are generally not what you're into, is gonna necessarily force you to change and grow. If you're not in a growth mindset right now in your playing or in your career or wherever you're at with the drums, that doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't for you. Remember that trying something out and deciding that you don't like it is fine. You can do that with food, you can do it with anything, but there's no reason not to try before you commit to the idea that something's not your preference. Before we get to this maybe uncomfortable higher tuning, let's give a listen to where the drums are at where we're starting. Now, the things that we get from drums tuned in this manner are big sounds, powerful sounds. They sound great in a mix. They sound fun to hit, especially really hard. But on the other side of things, there is some stuff that we're losing by having them pitched this low and set up in this way. In last week's episode, we addressed a similar thing, but from the perspective of dynamic range and exploring parts of the dynamic range that might be uncomfortable just based on your experience as a drummer. Now we can do the same thing with the range that the drums are actually tuned in and see what we can learn about our playing by giving ourselves a little bit of a challenge here. Over the course of this kind of thing, never forget that this is fun, this is exploration, and you don't have to be afraid to do these kinds of things, because at the end of the day, we're really just educating ourselves about what we like and also educating ourselves about what we can get by putting ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. Now we're going to pitch all the drums up. We're going to leave the snare alone, but we're going to pitch the rest of the drums up and start to get into the opportunities afforded to us by making these kinds of moves. Before we dive into examples, let's hear how they sound now that we've brought them up to a higher pitch. Now, for any jazz drummers out there screaming that those aren't pitched as high as jazz drums from the 50s and the 60s, as I stated earlier, we don't need to go to extremes to get the benefits of this kind of tuning scheme. This is significantly higher than they were before, and the feel is drastically changed, which is one of the big points that we're going to get into here. Let's take a moment to meet in the middle a little bit here. When we consider the idea of high-pitched jazz drums or low-pitched rock drums, a great spot where they marry is Buddy Rich on one hand and John Bonham on the other hand. They were active at points in Buddy's career at the same time. They both played similar sized drums in their drum sets, plus or minus a couple of inches, and they both liked big drums pitched up. This results in a certain pitch range that's usable for the music that both of these players were making at the top of their game, and it affords you tremendous amounts of rebound off of the drums and a powerful feel when you hit them, both at low dynamics and playing more aggressively. So if you're a jazz drummer, Buddy was tuning like this, not super high, but on the other hand, if you're a rock drummer, Bonham was right in this range, so at the end of the day, I think we could put it to rest. Let's talk about some specific benefits that we're getting from this kind of tuning scheme, a little higher than the original. Number one is we have more rebound off of the drums simply because there's more tension on all of them. This is true of the bass drum, it's true of the toms. This means for us that playing faster passages and playing more intricate passages in general is going to read clearer to any audience that might be listening and feel easier to articulate for us because we're not fighting the lack of tension on the drums. On the flip side, everything you play on these drums at this higher pitch is going to fly back at you an awful lot faster, so you end up learning not just how to use rebound, but also how to control that rebound, whether you're playing softly or really digging in. In addition to this rebound, we're also getting a lot more acoustic projection out of the drums than we were when they were tuned a lot lower. What this means for us and for you is that if you want someone or something to hear the drums at a greater distance with the full sound and not just the attack, this kind of tuning is throwing a lot more body toward an audience or a microphone or anything else. It may seem strange at the throne to hear rock drums tuned this way, but if you have the opportunity to have someone else, have them hit your drums when they're pitched up a little bit and stand 10 or 15 feet away from them if possible in your space and hear the difference between that and really low tuned drums. We really covered it pretty thoroughly in the previous week's episode, but it does bear repeating here that one of the biggest gains you get out of this kind of tuning really lives at the low dynamics. If generally you're swinging for the fences and hitting hard, super low tuned drums can really give you a lot, but as you start to play softer, or if you want that softer playing to really be clear, then you actually need more tension on the heads. It's just built in, it's physics. That gives us an opportunity to experiment with how we can control rebound at these lower volumes once we've pitched the heads up, because there's really not a lot to do with ultra low tuned drums when you're that low, because they're not giving us back any energy at all. We hear from a lot of players anytime that we get into a specific tuning scheme about why it's good or bad or right or wrong, and particularly with higher tuned drums in today's contemporary music, there's a lot of pushback unless you're just talking about jazz. Some of the things that slow people down when it comes to this kind of ultimately really fun experimenting is things like taste, like they feel like they're not supposed to like that sound, or maybe that their friends don't like it, and if they say that they like it, they're going to be kicked out of the tribe that only tunes their drums really low. This is a silly way of thinking. It's just an opportunity to grow. There's no sense not to do it, and frankly, the more of us that do this kind of thing, the more we'll inspire others to do it as well. I also hear from people personally who I teach that really feel uncomfortable with the feel of a higher tuned drum. It sometimes is true of the snare too, but particularly the toms and the bass drum. The fact of the matter is you can get comfortable with anything if you choose to get comfortable with it. So take a little time and see if there's something there for you. We try really hard not to tell people to buy more gear to get them what they need, and in particular, buying new stuff because they think their current drums won't do it. If you think your drums won't facilitate a high tuning, but you've never tried to tune them high, try to tune them high. We're using the same drums that we always use here, and we even saddled ourselves with 2-ply batter heads, which if you talk to anybody, they're going to say that's also the wrong thing for tuning high. So we're pushing ourselves to find a good sound here and challenge us, and you can do the same. Maybe the most important thing to address when it comes to exploring new tunings is just a lack of confidence that you don't think you'll be able to do it. We have been working on helping people tune their drums better or differently for years here now, and the same thing we started this channel with remains true. Give yourself the chance to make some mistakes. It's not going to hurt, and you will be able to get back to where you were. Just know that these things are meant to be bent to your will and not the other way around. So give yourself the opportunity. Give yourself a chance to grow. It's in there, and you can do it. Ultimately, all of these sounds live in a vacuum. They're just sounds, and whatever you like is okay. Just have fun. This is meant to be fun, and it can be fun even in the parts that are uncomfortable and tricky, and when you come out of the other end, you're going to be better for it. So try tuning them a little bit higher. You don't have to go extreme. We didn't go extreme today, but we learned some things along the way, and hopefully this is going to inspire you to do the same and find a sound you didn't even know you liked.